All 32 NFL teams have changed quite a bit since the beginning of the offseason in March. Which Seahawks opponents on the 2025 schedule have improved the most, and which ones have taken the biggest step back? We're going to be discussing and debating here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in, whether you're in Tulalip, Washington, or across the country in Richmond, Virginia. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are drawing closer to the start of OTAs, which means the actual offseason moves, for the most part, are done. The draft is done. Free agency, for the most part, is wrapped up. All the pre-draft process wrapped up. We are getting closer to the start of the season, and we know the Seahawks schedule now. So Rob and I are going to be taking a deep dive in way too early record predictions for the Seahawks. It's going to be a jam-packed episode. Let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Every NFL roster undergoes significant changes during every offseason. This year was no different. All 32 teams looking much different than they did before free agency started. The Seahawks, you can make an argument, are as different looking as any team in the NFL, for better or for worse in some regards, making a lot of changes to their roster. But every other team out there looks much different than they did at the end of last season. So, look, throw the strength of schedule stuff against the wall for all I care. To me, that's based off last year's teams. Every team is different. I don't really put too much value into that. I want to look at what teams look like when the offseason is wrapped up. And keeping that in mind, Rob, these teams are all different. It's time to look at Seattle's schedule compared to where it was when we found out opponents after Week 18 in January. What teams have improved the most and what teams have taken the biggest step back on Seattle's schedule? Let's start with the teams that improved the most. And I want to get your opinion on who you think the most improved team on Seattle's schedule is.
Actually, I'm going to go with the Arizona Cardinals. A division rival here. I just think that I'm intrigued by what is happening with Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals defense. I think that they are becoming more physical. I love their draft. I thought that they got an awful lot of players that really fit in with Gannon's system very well. Their first round selection, Walter Nolan, I think is a true penetrator that can be a difference maker. I also think that Will Johnson in the second round, as excited as the Seahawks might be about Nicky Manwari, I think that the Arizona Cardinals are feeling that same kind of a buzz about another defensive back who was every bit as productive when on the field, for the Michigan Wolverines. And then Jordan Burch is an edge rusher that I think that has a great deal of upside to him. And then I also just think that Kyler Murray is making strides. I do expect Marvin Harrison Jr. to kind of be a better player than he was as a rookie. So to me, Corbin, this is a team that didn't think made a lot of really splashy moves in free agency necessarily, some big moves, but at the same time, I also think that they're kind of lying under the radar of some people from a national perspective. But I think from a Seahawks perspective, the NFC West, I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to be a formidable opponent.
I've got the Jacksonville Jaguars down as my most improved team, and it isn't just about the moves they've made with personnel, though that's a big part of it. I'm a big believer in Liam Cohen. Everywhere that guy has gone, I know he's a first-time head coach, but look what he did with Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, and look what he did as part of the Rams coaching staff. When he was at Kentucky, Will Levis had a really good season, and then he leaves, and Levis took a big step back. It's not a coincidence to me. I think Liam Cohen is going to be a great asset for Trevor Lawrence. And then you go out and get Travis Hunter, arguably the best dual threat that there's been in the NFL draft, aside from the guy that coached him, Deion Sanders. I mean, the guy's going to play some on both sides of the ball, can be a all-pro caliber receiver. He's that talented at the position. They added a few offensive linemen. I think Patrick McCarry, the leadership that he brings is going to be big for them. So Jacksonville is a team that I think not just the coaches, but the personnel, they need a culture reset. I think Liam Cohen is going to do that. Second team that I have on my list as far as the most improved squads on the Seahawks schedule. Speaking of Tampa Bay, I know losing Liam Cohen, that's a big deal, but Baker Mayfield has just found it in Tampa Bay. And I don't know that there's a better receiving core in the NFL than what Tampa Bay's got right now. Mike Evans, a healthy Chris Godwin. You've got McMillan from Washington going into year 2. And, oh, by the way, they drafted Emeka Egbuka in the first round of this year. They have a bevy of weapons for Baker Mayfield. The offensive line is solid. And then they go out and get Hassan Reddick. I think that is one of the most underappreciated moves this offseason. That was what they needed most, was somebody that could really get after the quarterback, and Reddick can do that. Tampa Bay is a sleeper to me to make a deep run in the playoffs in the NFC with the talent that they've got there.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I'm a big fan of the general manager there, Jason Licht. I think that he just is perennially one of the most underrated talent evaluators in all of the NFL. I also think that one of the NFC South opponents, rivals for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Atlanta Falcons, to me is another winner, I think, throughout this process. And I know there's an awful lot of Seahawks fans, Pacific Northwest listeners who are going to be excited about Michael Penix Jr. I'm excited about Michael Penix Jr. as well. I'm very excited about Bijan Robinson. I'm very excited about the defensive-minded head coach, Raheem Morris, the fact that they kind of double-dipped, just addressing a pass rush that was clearly, and it was the league's worst at 3 of the last 5 seasons, not just this last year, but again, 3 of the past 5 seasons. And they went with 2 pass rushers that I'm very high on, in Jalen Walker as well as James Pierce. They're 2 very different players. Jalen Walker is a little bit more physical. He also can play that off-ball linebacker position. And then Pierce, it reminds me a little bit of Darrell Taylor. Say what you will about Darrell Taylor. He is an 8+ sack kind of a guy, kind of year in and year out. And I think that's exactly what the Falcons needed. So between the maturation, I think, that you're going to see from Michael Penix and that offense, and then the development of the defense. I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to be a team that is on the rise. And then for me, the Carolina Panthers, for the exact same reasons we talked about before. Bryce Young, I think you were starting to see under Dave Canales, as now obviously the head coach and formerly with Seattle. I just think that you saw the light bulb go off, so to speak, for Bryce Young. And so I'm excited to see what's going to happen. Tyrone McMillan is a player that a lot of people are excited about for Bryce. I'm just as excited about Nick Scorton on the defensive line for them.
Yep.
I mean, he is a blue-collar type of a player that the Carolina Panthers needed to get some of those kind of guys.
Yeah, Carolina is the third team on my list, adding a potential number 1 target for Bryce Young in McMillan. Scorton, they added a couple other pass rushers in the draft. O'Manlian from Ole Miss as well, coming on board. So they've got some really exciting young players, and that's just a team that was playing really good late last year. I think Carolina is ready to make strides. As far as the teams that took the biggest step back, my list and your list, Rob, we just found out before the show what our lists were, and you and I are thinking on the same page. I think you got to start with New Orleans. It was a huge blow losing Derek Carr to retirement with the shoulder injury. Maybe they're starting Tyler Shuck, the 25-year-old rookie. Maybe they're going to start Spencer Rattler out of the gate. We don't know what New Orleans is planning to do, but it's a team that lost a lot of good players away from the quarterback spot. They were already rebuilding. Now Derek Carr being gone, this is a full-scale rebuild. And I've got Pittsburgh and San Francisco as my other teams that took a step back. Look, the Steelers, they lost a couple of starting offensive linemen. They lost Najee Harris. And the quarterback spot, Mason Rudolph is your starter right now. Losing Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, they might not have been great last year, but that is a big drop-off in my mind. And if they get Aaron Rodgers, maybe that improves things a little bit. I can still see Pittsburgh being a playoff caliber team because of their defense, but even their defense lost some guys. They're getting old at a lot of positions on that side of the ball. And San Francisco, I can rattle off all the names that they lost. Javon Hargrave is no longer on the roster. Dre Greenlaw, Hafanga, they lost a lot of really good players this offseason. I just think it's going to take some time for the young players to step up. So to me, that team took a step back as well.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth when it came to San Francisco 49ers. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, look, I mean, Again, I think that there's a possibility that Mason Rudolph is okay. I think there's a possibility the Pittsburgh Steelers just kind of roll with their rookie in Will Howard. And just because I do think that he kind of fits in with their system better than, say, an Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is the guy for the Steelers, then why not do it now? I just see a potential disaster there for a franchise that I think has been one of the true icons in all of the NFL, Corbin. And it kind of pains me to say so. In that group, I'm a little bit of a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I mean, I'm a guy from the 70s, and that was, of course, the great Steelers defenses of all those years. But I just think if you combine Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf, as great as both of those players can be at their highest level, I also see an awful lot of pout. And pout is out when it comes to playoff contention, and so I do think that is a team that needs more time to gel, not less. And so again, if we're going to have some kind of fairy dust sprinkled over the quarterback position for the Pittsburgh Steelers, fine. But it's got to happen soon if you're going to be able to develop the camaraderie that is going to be able to kind of combat all of the losses that the Pittsburgh Steelers had. And then finally, the New Orleans Saints. We talked about some of the players. Obviously, there's an awful lot of coaches who left New Orleans. Now they're here in Seattle. It's one of the biggest reasons why I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to be one of the best or most improved teams in all of the NFL.
Yeah, the coaching thing, Kellen Moore's got his hands full as a first-time head coach. I expect that he's going to be successful if they're patient with him, but he is inheriting a really rough situation, especially with Derek Carr retiring. You mentioned you think the Seahawks are going to be one of the most improved teams. The question is, how much have they improved from their 10-win campaign last season? It's time for our way too early record predictions. We're going to start that off coming up next year on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. We're heading into the conference finals, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team in a matchup or diving into player props for teams still remaining in the hunt for an NBA title. From Tyrese Halliburton nailing clutch jumpers in the fourth quarter for the Pacers to Rudy Gobert's dominant defensive prowess, FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. And after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay to increase your chances of winning big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. This time a week ago, the NFL schedule was starting to come out. We got breadcrumbs with the international games. The Seahawks obviously didn't draw any of those. And then on Wednesday, we finally had all 18 weeks revealed for all 32 teams. So we know who the Seahawks will be playing, when they'll be playing them, how many primetime games they have. So with the roster set in place, we would expect there's going to be a few changes here and there. But what you have on the roster right now is probably going to be what the Seahawks have when they open the season in September. It's time for our way too early record predictions for the Seattle Seahawks. And Rob, I'm going to give you the mic here first. In week one, we've got the San Francisco 49ers coming to Seattle to open the season at Lumen Field.
Oh, that's the perfect way to start the season, Corbin. If you're going to be a player, then you are going to have to be able to obviously control your own division. The San Francisco 49ers have been the bully of the NFC West. Obviously, last season, it was the LA Rams that kind of seized control. But look, the 49ers are the team that has been doing this for an awful long time. So I do think that this is a victory for the Seahawks. I love the fact that it's at home. I love the fact that the 49ers have had, as much turnover as we just talked about here. And so I have the Seahawks actually starting off 3-0. I think that they're not only going to start off 3-0, I think that they're going to walk into their bye in week 8 at 6-1, and one of the real players in all of the NFC, create a whole bunch of attention. And that to me is going to be one of the most fascinating storylines. And look, I know there's going to be some Seahawks fans out there who are going to be a little bit skeptical. They're going to say, I'm wearing those blue collar, mama blue kind of sunglasses or whatever, looking at this schedule. I think that it's a talent. I think that it is the coaching. And I also think that the schedule, to me, the schedule is very kind to the Seahawks. I think that they can start off this season on a in a big way. Obviously, injuries are going to play a part. That's why you said it is way too early to making the kind of bold proclamations here. But I do think if the Seahawks are going to beat the 49ers at home, I do think that they're going to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road. They're going to beat the New Orleans Saints teams. Again, those are the 3 teams that I thought were were the 3 teams on Seattle's entire schedule that perhaps have regressed the most. And then I do think that there's a chance that they lose to the Arizona Cardinals. That, to me, I think is going to be a really interesting game. But I have them beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home, going on the road and beating Jacksonville. And then the primetime game against the Houston Texans, to me, is one of the most fascinating matchups in this entire season. I just love the fact that Seattle's at home in that environment. I think that if they are 5-1 at that point, then just the Lumen Field buzz is going to be enough to beat a guy like a C.J. Stroud or Will Anderson and propel the Seahawks into their bye week, again, as one of the best teams in all of the NFL.
You and I are in agreement on week 1. I started off with the victory, and I've talked about this some when the schedule came out last week. I think drawing the 49ers at home early in the season is going to be a benefit for Seattle because we talked about earlier this episode all the veterans they lost. They are going to be plugging a lot of rookies into the lineup, a lot of young players into the lineup that haven't played a lot of snaps. I think drawing them early when those youngsters are trying to get their feet underneath them, some of the guys coming off injuries, not that it's going to be an easy game. San Francisco is going to come ready to play. But I think that this is a team that's going to take some time to get going with all the newcomers they've got. I just like it that they've got week 1 at Lumen Field. And it's funny, we talked about Pittsburgh being a team that's regressed this offseason, and I will stick with that. But listen, this is the first time that you and I disagree on this front. It's the Pittsburgh curse. The Steelers, when they have played the Seahawks at home, with the exception of, I believe it was the 2019 season that Seattle went in there and got a win, but it was close. Seattle is a team that has historically struggled playing in the Steel City. I have that being the first loss that they have. And DK Metcalf, who knows, going to be thrown to him. I think it's going to probably be Aaron Rodgers. It's just not happened to this point. But I think Pittsburgh at home early in the season there, that's one of those games where it just feels like it has a chance to get ugly and be a kind of a muddied up game. And I think Pittsburgh at home wins it, a low-scoring affair. I do agree with you in week 3 that the Seahawks are going to get the win over the Saints. To me, if there's a gimme on their schedule, New Orleans would be the one. No team is easy, but that is a team that is entering a rebuild. And really where you and I, one other situation that we are not on the same, quite on the same tangent, you've got Seattle losing to Arizona in Glendale on Thursday Night Football. Anytime they play those two teams at Glendale at State Farm Stadium on a Thursday night, you're just hoping your guys get out of there without injuries, given the history. But Seattle historically has won most of the games there, and I think they continue that with a primetime win over the Cardinals to get to 3-1. And the other spot where you and I are in disagreement, I mentioned Tampa Bay, their improvement. I think Tampa Bay is a team that has to be looked out for among the NFC's best teams. I really do. I love what they're building there. I just think Baker Mayfield has found his home. He's playing great football. I've got Tampa Bay coming into Lumen and winning that game in week 5. As for the last 2 games in the first half of the schedule, I've got Seattle winning both those. So we have almost the same records. I've got Seattle at 5-2 in their first 7 games, the difference being the Buccaneers and Cardinals games and the Steelers games. You and I are going a little bit different direction. And you've got Seattle at 6-1. Both of us are optimistic. I do see a few opponents there that maybe based on where they're playing the game at or just being slept on a little bit. I think Tampa Bay, they've been very close to knocking really good teams out of the playoffs the last 2 years. And I think they did some nice things to help themselves get over the hump. That's going to be a really tough game in week 5.
Oh, no question about it. I think that, again, Tampa Bay Buccaneers to me are one of the more slept on teams in all of the NFL. I think that one of the other most slept on teams in all of the NFL happens to be the Seattle Seahawks. And so if this game had been in Tampa Bay, then yeah, I think I would lean towards Tampa Bay. That's an awful long flight, Corbin. And you look at some of the teams that the Bucs are playing, and in the weeks before and after that. That's why I think that's going to be a really difficult matchup. Now, again, it all comes down to how effective is Sam Darnold. Is this defense going to play at the same level that they did last year, or perhaps even make strides? I am bullish on both. I think that Sam Darnold is not going to put up the eye-popping fantasy football kind of statistics that maybe Geno Smith did. I don't think that this offense is going to ask him to do that. I do think, however, that Seattle is going to be able to run the ball a little bit more effectively. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of all the teams that we just talked about, and again, I had them losing to the Arizona Cardinals because in large part because it's a short week. And again, Arizona is a team I think is on the upswing. But at the same time, in terms of just the physical matchups, I do have some reservations about Vita Vea in particular and how he might be able to just completely dominate the interior of Seattle's offensive line. Look, Gray Zabel, we're both as high as you can be on this rookie. Whether it be Olu Oluwatimi, whether it be Jalen Sandell, who knows what's going to happen. But at the same time, when you have a guy as physically dominant as Vita Vea, that to me is one of those types of players that absolutely could turn this game on its ear, to the way that the Pittsburgh Steelers, to your points earlier, could do the exact same thing. So again, these are some games that I feel like are some of the wild cards early on in the season. But at the same time, we are in agreement. We think that the Seahawks are going to be entering their bye very much on a playoff push.
Yeah, you may notice with the teams I have Seattle losing to, I'm looking at that interior defensive line. Cameron Hayward is still an all-pro caliber player, and that's week 2. Gray Zabel still getting his legs underneath him. That's a really tough draw, or whoever's playing center. Pittsburgh's also got a couple other really good defensive linemen in the interior. They added Derek Harmon in the draft. I know you were very high on him. That is a really good defensive line. And then Tampa Bay with Vita Vea, and they've got a couple other pieces in the interior. So those are teams I think could give Seattle the most trouble with what they are trying to do, building that interior offensive line. So when we come back, we are going to be flipping to the second half of the schedule. I've got the Seahawks at 5-2. Rob is really high on this first half with a 6-1 start for the Seahawks. 12s would be dancing in the rain-covered streets if that ends up happening to open the season. But we got a lot of games left to predict here as we dive into the 2025 schedule. We'll get to the second half coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks schedule was released, just like the rest of the league, last Wednesday. And now we've had a chance to really look at all these games, which teams have improved, which ones have taken a step back, and just the schedule as a whole, how it shook out for the Seahawks. And it's time for us to continue our way too early record predictions. I have the Seahawks at 5-2 going into their week 8 bye, coming off a big win over the Houston Texans on Monday Night Football. You have the Seahawks at 6-1 with their only blemish being the Cardinals on the road. I've got Seattle losing to the Steelers on the road and losing to the Buccaneers at home. So let's dive into the second half schedule. And before we get into all the other games, we got to start with this game coming out of week 9, Rob, because to me, this is going to be a real litmus test, especially if Seattle is 5-2 or 6-1 coming out of their bye. Then you got to fly to Landover and battle the NFC runner-up Washington Commanders, a team that you and I are both very high on to compete for a Super Bowl this year with some of the additions they've made in free agency and the draft. I'm curious where you think this game is going, because in the past, Seattle has been able to play pretty well in Washington or at Landover, but this is not the team that they had played for much of the last 20 years there, as the Commanders are a vastly improved team that could make a run at a Lombardi trophy.
They absolutely could. I mean, if you were going to pinpoint a team that just felt like they were on absolute fire at the end of last season, just pick out one and like, okay, who do you want to buy stock in as far as a franchise that is just on the upswing? I mean, I can't believe that we're saying this, but Washington was that team, and hey, give credit to Jaden Daniels and certainly to Dan Quinn. I mean, they did an unbelievable job with what they were able, to do for that division. That said, I think back to Jaden Daniels at Arizona State before he went to LSU, and he flashed as a freshman, and then there was a little bit of a sophomore slump, a little bit of junior struggles as well before he made that transfer to LSU. I do think that this is the game that the Seahawks ultimately lose. But at the same time, I am a little bit less bullish on the Washington Commanders than some of the other teams out there seem to be, or some of the other media members out there seem to be. I mean, I've seen so many Super Bowl predictions for Washington, and it's like, okay, we'll see on all of that. Oh, by the way, that might arguably be the best division in all of the NFL that they're going to have to just go up against, including obviously the real Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. So I do have the Seahawks losing this game. I do think it is the most fascinating game on Seattle's entire slate. It breaks my heart that it's actually on the road rather than at Lumen Field, but for so many different reasons, whether it be just the reuniting with Dan Quinn, with Bobby Wagner, just being Jaden Daniels, all these things make that a fascinating game. I have the Seahawks losing that game. I have them winning at home the next week against the Arizona Cardinals, and then actually losing on the road to the LA Rams. So for, again, all those who are saying that I'm just way too optimistic, I have Seattle losing 2 of their 3 after the bye. And then I think they're going to get hot. And that, to me, is one of the biggest reasons why I'm excited about the Seahawks this season, Corbin, is I just think that there is a chance that they might have a couple of hiccups. But I do think that what health permitting, that this is a schedule, this is a team, this is a coaching staff that I think that once the ball gets rolling, literally, in the running game, that I do think that this team could make quite the run here in the second half of the season.
We are in agreement on coming up short in Landover. I think that's going to be a really good game. I just think playing on the road, the East Coast, and just how talented the Commanders are, I just think the Seattle comes up short there. But where you and I go a little bit astray here, I've got Seattle winning both Week 10 and Week 11. I like them at home against the Arizona Cardinals. I just feel like Seattle has got a really good team personnel-wise to match what the Cardinals are bringing to the equation. And then the Rams, let's be honest, Seattle has played the Rams tougher the last 4 or 5 years. They've played them tougher at SoFi Stadium than they had at Lumen Field. And I think that trend continues here. So I have the Seahawks winning those next 2 games. In fact, let's move it to 3 because Cam Ward, I think, is going to be a solid starting quarterback. Tennessee, though, is at least a year away from being competitive in the AFC South. I still expect them to have one of the weaker teams in the NFL. They need to build more talent around Cam Ward. Even going to Nashville, that can be a tough road trip. I have Seattle getting the victory there. So I'm looking at going into the final home stretch, those last 6 games, with the Seattle Seahawks being 8-3, which should put them in a really good position to potentially win the NFC West and maybe be in contention for one of those top seeds in the NFC.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, as I was kind of describing a moment ago, is I do think that Seattle's going to be in position to have that type of a finish and potentially be hoisting the NFC West divisional championship trophy, so to speak. Just real quickly, in Week 13, the fact that this game is at home against Minnesota, the Sam Darnold kind of revenge game, so to speak. I think that's going to be a fascinating one. I think the Minnesota Vikings, like the Washington Commanders, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are some of the better teams in all of the NFC that are not, of course, the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. So I think that's going to be a fascinating game. And the only reason I'm going with Seattle here is the fact that it is at home in Lumen Field. I think Week 14 against Atlanta, I just think that the Falcons are making a move. I just don't think that they're quite as good, quite as well-rounded as the Seahawks are. I think that Indianapolis is another team that it will be fascinating to see who is playing the quarterback by the time we get to Week 15. But I do think that is a team that has some talent that could give Seattle some struggles. If Seattle is unable to stop the run the way they did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, obviously saw huge strides in the run defense this past season. But if they do struggle, then Indianapolis is a team that absolutely can surprise you even at home. I have them beating the LA Rams at home. I think that they will struggle on the road. You talked about Jared Verse, Braden Fisk. That defensive line, to me, was one of the most formidable ones that the Seahawks are going to face all year long. And so I think that they will be able to win at home. I think they may struggle on the road. It remains to be seen, of course, if Matthew Stafford is able to stay healthy at that point, what he's going to do with Cooper Kupp now on Seattle's roster, rather than LA's, with all due respect to Puka Nacua and the rest of that Rams squad. And then I have them beating the Carolina Panthers on the road late, and that's going to be a formidable challenge because, of course, I think that it's going to be so easy for the Seahawks to look at Carolina. Let's assume for a moment that Carolina is not the big playoff contender that you and I both think that they could be. They're both among our teams that we thought were going to be an improvement. But I do think it's going to be really easy to be looking ahead to that very last game on the road in San Francisco. And that's why I have Seattle stubbing their toes, so to speak, against Carolina, and then kind of winning against Carolina, but then stubbing their toe against San Francisco at the very end. I think San Francisco is going to be fighting for their playoff lives. I think that Seattle is going to be resting guys, kind of the way the LA Rams did a year ago. And so I have the Seahawks finishing the season at 13-4, easily in the playoffs, quite possibly the divisional champions, and then now competing to see if they're going to be the first, second seed, if they're going to be hosting throughout the playoffs. That to me is why I think that this is a Seahawks season that fans should be very excited about.
Yeah, I'm not, again, listen, I got the Seahawks having a really good season. I have a couple more losses on the docket, and I want to start off with that game in week 13 against the Minnesota Vikings, and just posted your schedule again. But for me, I've got Minnesota coming to town and winning that one because I still think the Vikings, that was a team that won 14 games last year. I'm confident that they are going to be able to ease the burden on J.J. McCarthy. They improved their offensive line going out and getting Will Fries, Ryan Kelly. So they bolster that interior. They can run the ball. You've got Justin Jefferson, a couple other really good receivers on the outside. And on defense, they've added some pieces as well. I just think that's a case the better team wins that game. But I have the Seahawks getting the win in Atlanta. I just, like you, I think Seattle's just a better team. And for whatever reason, they like playing in Atlanta over the years. And Indianapolis, I know there's a lot of people that are looking at them as a sleeper. I'm looking at them as a sleeper in the sense that they're sleeping their way to 3 or 4 wins. I do not see a team that is going to be in the playoff hunt. They've got major issues at quarterback. Unless Anthony Richardson turns the lights on, I don't see Daniel Jones taking this team anywhere. And if Anthony Richardson doesn't take a big step forward, you have to be able to throw the football some to win in this league. They've got a good run game, but they've got questions on defense. I just don't think Indianapolis is a very good football team. So I've got Seattle winning that one. And then when you look at the rest of this season for me, I've got Seattle wrapping up at 11-6, which very well could be enough to win this division. Maybe it won't be, but I think getting that extra win from last year, I look at this, it's such a weird dynamic with the Rams. Matthew Stafford, for whatever reason, he just brings his A game when the Rams play at Lumen Field. I have Seattle slipping up there. I do have them winning in Carolina. The Panthers are coming, but I don't think they're quite there yet. Seattle gets that big win, and you and I are in agreement in Week 18. San Francisco, late in the season, I think is going to be a team that's surging as long as they don't have a bunch of injuries because they do have some good young players that by that point may be playing much better football. They could have a lot more at stake in that game than what even Seattle does. I think it's going to be hard to sweep the 49ers with Week 1 and Week 18 being the games on the road. I've got Seattle closing out, losing 2 of their final 3, but still 11-6 gives you a really good chance to be the NFC West champion. And I know they missed the playoffs at 10 wins last year. I find it very hard to believe they are not a playoff team if they can get that 11th win, no matter what happens at the top of the division. I think this is a playoff team. I think they got a really good chance to win the division. I just think there's some games peppered in there that are going to be challenging as this team tries to acclimate with a new quarterback, a lot of new pieces on offense. The defense I'm really excited about early in the season. The offense is going to be what dictates how many games this team ends up winning in 2025.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. I think that Seattle, the expectations of Seattle is going to be able to run the ball significantly better than they did the last couple of seasons. And if that is not the case, then I think that you can, I mean, I'm not going to say flip the record that I just had. I mean, I had the Seahawks being 13-4. I'm not suggesting that they're going to go 4-13. But at the same time, I do think that this could be a 500 kind of club if they are not able to run the ball consistently. I don't think that Sam Darnold is so much better than Geno Smith or Brock Purdy or Matthew Stafford or Kyler Murray that he is just going to be able to put the Seahawks on his back the way that he did at times with the Minnesota Vikings. I think that there are, again, 6 games in this schedule, Corbin, that I would argue are very much wild cards, kind of pick 'em kind of games that I have the Seahawks just dominating at home, and Seattle has not been able to dominate at home since the Legion of Boom era. So whether it be because the Seahawks fans are now a little bit intimidated, they don't want to sell their tickets. They actually want to go to games. I think that that's going to play a part in it. I think that the Seahawks are just a physically better and meaner, nastier, faster football team that they've been here for a while. Again, I do think that this is easily a double-digit kind of a club, and I think it's a team that could make a real playoff push.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we are going to continue our OTA preview. We're going to be looking at the running back position on offense and edge rushers on defense. A lot of talk going into next week's OTAs. We got a big question for both of those position groups that we're going to tackle, some competitions to watch, and much, much more. Make sure that you listen and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.